Hello, and welcome everyone to the after show for modern day debate between Skylar Fiction and Austin Whitsitt. The debate topic was, is slavery in the Bible immoral or moral? I can't remember which one, but that was basically it. What an interesting time. I've never seen Whitsitt debate anything. No, I tell a lie. I did see Whitsitt debate evolution once, but apart from that, I've never seen him debate any topic. And what was astounding for me in this one was that he absolutely had no preparation, no verses, no scriptures, no anything, and just sort of winged it. It was absolutely insane. It was just, he had he did not quote any scripture once. I've never seen that in a biblical debate before, that somebody does not quote scripture in the slightest. It's really weird. And his excuse was sort of, oh, well, I only knew this happened in the last couple of days. Yeah, I get it. Like, you may have very short amount of time to prep, but surely you can reference some Bible verses to quote, kind of thing. Anyway, I mean, I'll open up the room because I just wanted to give my feelings on it. And the whole, it's sidetracked into it's this sort of a gun debate, which, to be honest with you, I would love that debate. I would love to do a gun that's one of the topics that I really enjoy doing. So I was kind of jealous. Skylar did amazing, in my opinion, of course. I think that he was the one quoting the scripture and reading it out and sort of saying what it was, without just saying the Bible says this, which is usually what you see in these debates. You usually see, hey, the Bible says this is how it's interpreted, this scholar supports it in this way, and you'll have a discussion on the exegesis of the Bible. It's very, very strange to see that not happening from the Christian side, and it's happening from the atheist side, which is highly unusual. I don't know if I'm alone in thinking that, but just give me one sec and I will set this up for anybody's welcome to join. I mean, obviously, if we do have the interlocutors, they're absolutely welcome. I'll just sort out pinning the comment so we can get this party started. I'll pin it to the top. So that is the link to join. Everyone's welcome. Give me your thoughts, opinions, disagree. That's fine. I'd really like to know what you heard in the debate and what sort of appealed to you. But yeah, the gun debate is one that I definitely want to have at some point. If anyone wants to debate, I'm in favor of gun control. If anyone wants to debate against it, I'm more than happy to. Would love to go on Modern Day Debate and debate that. Hello, Beamsy. Welcome. Good to see you.
Whitsitt hurt me in the fifis.
Oh, he did? Oh, I'm so sorry. How are your fifis? You okay?
He was talking about the unconformities, the missing of the sedimentary layers, and they use sedimentary layers. Yeah. Yep. Does he not understand what the flood basalt eruptions did?
Probably not. I must admit I'm not familiar with the flood basalt eruptions, but I do presume that is a geological event that sort of explains why we have a unconformity in the geological layers, I'm guessing.
The way a flood basalt eruption works is it basically floods an area the size of a continent, destroying layers of sediment and laying down one massive chunk of basalt.
Okay.
If you look at the Siberian traps, it's probably one of the clearest examples of that.
Okay. I will look at that. So they're basalt eruption. Okay. I'll just add to the stream, Bert Thompson, welcome. I don't think I've met you before, but you're very welcome. We're going sideways. We're good. Good to
Hey,
see
I'm doing
you.
the best I can. How you doing, mate?
Yeah, no worries at all, Bert. No worries at all, mate.
Yeah.
And Dr. Tapioca Weasel, how are you today?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. What a trip it always is to watch Witsit debate.
That was interesting. Yeah, very interesting. I'm really taken aback by the lack of actual scripture discussed from Wiki's side. I don't understand. I mean, me personally, I'd have my interlinear Bible out and sort of, really be looking at the exegesis of those passages. But,
I've had
it's
this
very
discussion with
strange.
him before, actually, on Discord.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was me and
What?
another guy, Demon Stride, and we brought up all the
Okay.
same passages that
Yeah.
Skylar did.
Well, the main one that Witsit was talking about was the kidnapping of people, and that's sort of that argument's been pretty solidly put to bed that what they're talking about is the kidnapping of other people, either free people or slaves from the masters that own them, kind of thing. It's not like you can still go and buy slaves from elsewhere. That doesn't prevent that. And the Bible clearly states that you may buy your slaves from the countries around you, the nations around you, and from the foreigners living among you. So, I don't see how kidnapping would stop you from going out and buying a slave, because it clearly doesn't.
It's a bit like when they passed, is it the 13th Amendment in the US, how it's no longer legal to own slaves, except for this one way you can own slaves, which is if they're in prison.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah, that's unless it's legal, it mentions legally imprisoning, taking away people's freedom,
Yep.
because of violation of law, I believe, something like that. I can't remember the exact thing. But
Neither
yeah, kind of. There's
neither
that.
slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as punishment for a crime whereof the party shall have been duly
Right.
convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to this jurisdiction.
Right.
That's what it
So
says.
that's the
So
one.
yeah, they can make you work. It's not just imprisonment. They can make you work. That's sort of the thing.
I have mixed feelings about prisoner worker programs.
I mean, you're Australian, I would imagine. It's a prison
Yeah.
colony originally, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we were kind of shipped away to create the colony for the English, and then sort of took it over. But anyway, I think that sort of having work programs for volunteers to give them work experience and integrate them back into the community can be a good idea. That can be beneficial, but it's when the main purpose is simply to make the prison system money and the privately run prison money. I think you really have to evaluate what the intention is, because I think a lot of them are run sort of, private corporations own the prisons and they work them to make money off the back of the prisoners.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that the whole idea that because you're not allowed to kidnap people, then slavery doesn't exist was a really poor argument. It was really poor. I mean, I could not kidnap anybody, or not steal a person's car, but if I'm allowed to go out and buy a car, I still own that car. It's this whole idea of, well, if you illegally acquire something, then it stops that thing. And that's not true, because there are ways to legally acquire the thing in question. So, yeah, shocking argument. Absolutely shocking.
Well, he didn't. He just sort of denied everything when it was brought up to him this sort of first time he heard that slavery was condoned in the Bible. And then they didn't really touch on the morality, I think. So like the idea that you can beat your slave, and if the slave doesn't die, then you don't face any repercussions. That sort of that passage, it not only condones slavery, but it also shows something immoral can happen with that power dynamic. And that sort of destroys it, even if it is just sort of like chattel slavery. It's still immoral slavery.
He was using Exodus 21:16 entirely as the basis of his defense. But then all the other 300 verses that actually mention slavery sort of counteract that.
Well, he seems to think, and it's funny that he did go to Exodus 21, because creationists usually won't bring up that verse by themselves. Like, it really is a verse that's the verse where you can beat your slave with a rod, as you mentioned, Bert.
No, 21:16 is whoever steals a man and sells him, and anyone found in possession of him shall be put to death.
No, but like 21 chapter. Sorry, I should say chapter rather than verse. Chapter 21 they usually avoid, because chapter 21 has all that stuff about beating a slave in it. So they usually will avoid Exodus 21 because it really is a horrendous passage. For instance, 21:20 is the one that Bert was referring to. Anyone who beats their male or female slave with a rod must be punished if the slave dies as a direct result. 21, but they are not to be punished if the slave recovers after a day or two, since the slave is their property. Right? Or if you look at an interlinear Bible, it says the slave is their money. It means that it is something that is owned, kind of thing. Their wealth would maybe be another translation that would be accurate. And then it sort of says, if you hit a male or female slave in the eye, it destroys it, you must let it go. So there were rules around how badly you could beat a slave. But the question is it moral to beat a slave at all? I'll just say, Theros Rex, your mic or cam isn't connected, so you might need to connect at least your mic before I can put you on stream, mate. Just letting you know. But the 16, he seems to think that passage overrides everything else, and because you can't kidnap people, you can't enslave them, which is clearly not true. Exodus 21 also has a really interesting passage that basically says, and I've got it here, if a bull gores a male, if a bull gores a male or female slave, the owner must pay 30 shekels of silver to the master of the slave. Right. So this is something outlined in Dr. Josh Bowen's book, Slavery in the Old Testament, I believe it is. There's clearly a class system where if your slave is damaged, thanks, Theros. Cheers. I'll just add you now, and welcome, Theros Rex. I'll just get through this point, and then I can talk to you for a sec. If your slave gets gored by a bull, you get the not the slave. You get compensated for the damage of your property, your wealth, your money. So it clearly shows a designation between those people that, because if you're gored, you get paid as a free person, but if your slave gets gored, you get paid. So it clearly shows this class designation of, who is responsible to whom, if something is damaged. And welcome, Theros Rex. What are your thoughts on the debate?
Howdy.
Hey.
To be honest, I only really caught the last few minutes of it, but
that's okay.
I mean, it's Witsit. He's never right about anything.
Ever.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, he may be right about the stabbings in Australia. Per capita, it may be higher. I'm not 100% sure on that. I can only find 2023 statistics currently. So it's kind of, I would like to, sorry, welcome back, Bert. Sorry about that, mate.
Sorry.
I would, no worries at all, mate. I'd like to find 2022 statistics. I couldn't find any. I would love to see them, but it might take a bit more research on my end. But even if the stabbings are higher in Australia, unless the amount of stabbings, like homicides in general, using any weapon is getting above gun violence, then he doesn't really have a point. He just is sort of deflecting. So, yeah, and it was kind of odd. He seemed to make a lot of, like, his religiosity was really showing on this one, which I've noticed in flat earth debates he generally tries to avoid. He sort of was talking about giants and, Amalekites being half giant creatures or something. Like, he really dehumanized. Right, the Nephilim. Like, he really dehumanized those tribes, kind of thing. And when we look at the history, and actual archaeologists and professionals go and look into it was just infighting between tribes. That's all it was. There was no, like, some people argued, oh, they were eating babies. There's no evidence that any civilization has been eating babies and stuff like that. It's just a non-argument. It's just sort of, they want to make their enemies look bad. So I don't, yeah.
Yeah, I think you're pretty right on that. I mean, at least since the first iterations of the Bible that I'm aware of, they've been some of the original enemies of Christians since the beginning. And when you've had 2,000 years to demonize a group of people, they get pretty quote-unquote demonic.
Right. I mean, the propaganda was probably pretty unsophisticated back then, and sort of revolved around religion. The God hates these people kind of thing. Do we know that's true? No. One thing I will say, though, is that from talking with a few people, especially, Dr. Josh, the slavery in the Bible was nowhere near as bad as sort of antebellum slavery in the South. That's absolute fact. They had more rights, they had more privileges, but that doesn't make it morally right to own people. It's still immoral, and sort of, so I don't think it has to rise to that level. And what I'll do is add another. Hello, Emmanuel. How are you doing? And what's your thoughts on the debate, or anything else you'd like to raise? Hot takes. No worries. We'll catch up with us whenever you can, Emmanuel. I'll leave you in, mate, with no problem at all.
If I might say something quick.
Of course.
I'm not too much of a history person. I mostly just go after Witsit because his takes on science are absolutely horrendous. And like I said, I only caught the last few minutes of the debate, but from everything else I've seen of the guy, I'm going to guess he didn't look into his sources too well, relied a lot on the Bible, and was in general just an antagonistic jerk who is super fun to talk to.
Well,
yep.
I think my read on Witsit now, because I've had a lot of interactions with him over the Tartary Discord server, my read is sort of that he'll have these strong positions because someone he likes, like a Kent Hovind, has that position, and then he just follows on from it.
Oh, and it's always great to idolize Kent.
Yeah. Stupid.
Yeah.
But he's very much a sovereign citizen, pro-gun. He thinks germ theory is wrong. He thinks the age of the earth is wrong. He thinks the earth is flat. And he thinks things like, the Bible is literal. So he has all these positions, and they're all sort of disconnected until you can tie them all back together with this idea that he wants to be able to think what he thinks, or what he's been told to think by someone he trusts. He wants to be able to think that's right using whatever method he likes using. And then anyone that says he's wrong must implicitly be wrong. And I think MC Toon had a good name for that he did a stream on not long ago.
Motivated.
I think that's a really good take on it, honestly.
I think he called it was some form of narcissism. It's like grandiose narcissism, where you believe you're so much smarter than anyone, so it gets into that Dunning-Kruger thing or top left that they like to do. And then the narcissism of I'm so much better than everyone, therefore I should be seen more. And then because of that narcissism, it causes him to be like a compulsive liar and somewhat of a sociopath.
So like Dunning-Kruger plus main character syndrome?
Yeah,
I mean, I wouldn't try to sort of psychoanalyze somebody. I'm certainly not qualified, but there is something there where he states things as absolute truth that he's been shown to be wrong. I don't know.
I've never met somebody as confident as Witsit.
Yeah,
he's utterly completely confident that he is totally obviously right all of the time.
I mean,
it's
what does the
remarkable. It's a work
con
of
and
art.
con man stand for again?
Yep.
It's fascinating seeing the times he was arrested. He's always been confrontational and painful.
Yeah, if people haven't seen that, there's footage of that on Audit the Audit's channel, which is hilarious.
No, that's the time he was arrested in front of the what was
Mount
it?
Rushmore.
Yeah.
And there's another one where he was arrested in front of a school. And there was another one.
No, that was Nathan Thompson. That was Nathan Thompson that was arrested in front of the school.
Yeah, there is one with Witsit too.
Really?
I'll see if I can find it again. It's about 5 years old. I'll see if I can find it again. I was bored and having a look around last night.
Okay.
Wow, you must be really bored if you're looking up Austin.
Or would that get the stream blocked?
No. They just try and convince kids that the Earth is flat. You know, they're not doing anything. Yeah, see, I see the one in Mount Rushmore. Yeah, and that's on Audit the Audit with 898,000 views. That's actually quite impressive, really. But you know, if you could find it, that's great. If not, I mean, he's just got busted by MC Toon on because some of the citations he was using on his debate before this one, and I looked them up because when he puts in a citation, I'm gonna look up this citation. Like, are you kidding me? Of course I'm gonna look it up. Anybody in modern day debate, if they put down a citation, I'm reading it. Like, there's no way I'm just gonna, you know, just let it pass me by. And I look up his and I couldn't find any of his. Like, Google Scholar tried my library, you know, sort of university library reference guide kind of thing, reference search engine, tried everything. And words would be picked up here and there, but something was wrong, except for one of them, which was a book, not a paper, which is, you know, I mean, he said he had papers. He doesn't understand the difference between a book and a paper. Okay, that one was legit. But all the rest, about 4 or 5 of them, just were not getting results. So MC Toon, he said, yeah, what he's done is he's put something into Chat GPT, and that's printed out examples of citations. They're not real citations. I did it myself in one of my streams. You can put in, give me examples of what citations would look like for a non-globe planier Earth, and it will print out all these citations. I put them into my search, like Google Scholar and stuff. It gave me the exact same thing because it's just pulling words from web crawlers, essentially.
Yeah, he did that for Bryant Meyer, I think, for downward acceleration due to electrical something potential.
Yeah. So these sort of citations that you get, like, you know, when you read enough papers and when you go to university and stuff, you know, citations, they have a DOI, which is a digital object identifier. It identifies the paper that you know, the peer review process assigns this to them. We keep track of all of these, you know, like we have a very robust and comprehensive library of every paper ever written in the modern age. Like, there's you can go and look up Galileo's papers and things like that. Like, the science is very, very indexed and very easy to find. So when you have 4 or 5 citations and they lead nowhere, not even you know, maybe one word different, something's up. Something's really wrong. So, you know, it was eye-opening for me because there was something so sus about it, and MC Toon tracked it down. Good on him, because so 2 thoughts crossed my mind, right? 2 thoughts. Number one, Witsit used it because he thinks that ordinary citations are just bullshit, basically. He thinks scientists are just making them up as well, so why doesn't he just make them up? Or number 2, he's actually being deceptive and going, I'm going to fool these people. And,
sorry,
you know...
could I
no, go for it. Interrupt
there?
me. I will talk forever, Theros, if you let me. So please interrupt me if you've got something to say.
So a little bit about me. I was a geology major for the last 4 or so years. Graduated from university. Every single professor I met, like they would just gush like crazy about their hypotheses and theories. Like people in science cannot lie to you. But okay,
Well,
with
I
limitations
mean,
on that. But
yeah, you want to qualify that somewhat, but
yeah, I think you better walk that back a bit.
In most
Andrew
cases,
Wakefield,
they are not going to lie to you, because if they do lie to you, all of their peers are going to call them out on it.
Yeah,
And
they
it's
face repercussions.
pretty easy to see when that happens.
As a generality, yes, kind of thing. That's what. So peer review's got problems, like replication studies aren't being done enough. There are individuals around there. Like I mentioned Andrew Wakefield and his famous, vaccines cause autism paper that got him thrown out of academia. Yeah. There's incidents like that. So things do make it through the peer review process. It does happen. We know.
To be fair with Wakefield's paper, from what I've heard, as soon as it was published, essentially every doctor who knew something related to the subject was calling him out on it.
Well, not
as
just
far
that,
as I know,
some of his,
I was a baby when all this was going on, to be honest.
Right. I wasn't, and sort of so. What some of his subjects that he included in the sample. So some of the parents said that he actually took fraudulent answers, right? That he actually falsified data. And, his sample size was small. It was like 12 people or something, for a sample size, if you ever do statistical data analysis, your proper p-value, if it's anything under 300, you've got to make some serious concessions to the probability of that being correct. Anything under 300 is usually, you've got to say, hey, the sample size was small, so this could deviate depending on, how far away it is from that minimum sample size.
Totally.
So 12 is ridiculous. 12 people is not a sample size you would be wanting to make any kind of definitive statement on. So anyway, that's what happened with him. And he's not even a doctor anymore. He's had his license taken away.
I think there's a set of criterion that you should use anytime you cite a paper or a scientific source. It shouldn't just be that there is a paper, it's been published, it's gone through the peer review process, therefore it's more or less fact or correct. I think you need to look at the amount of citations, as you said, Mark, the sample size, the p-values, those sorts of things. And then if you can get your hand on a systemic review. Sorry,
one of the big things too is just methodology. Like in your methodology, you should step by step explain how to replicate this experiment. And if one part of it does not make sense, it's very likely the entire rest of your conclusions is going to be skewed.
Well, what if you're not smart enough to understand the methodology?
Well, that's where you have misinterpretations of papers. You have people sort of reading the abstract and going, oh, it proves this, and when really, if you actually look at the methodology, they're saying, hey, this is a hypothesis. And the idea is that should be picked up in peer review. If their methodology is flawed, it absolutely should be picked up. But nothing's perfect, so these papers do come through. And I was talking to a bunch of flat earthers who are looking at this paper about sort of electric quantum gravity and electric states marrying sort of regular physics with quantum physics kind of thing. So gravity with quantum physics, and it was great. And it sort of had like a lot of equations, a lot of really difficult to understand stuff. But they completely missed over where it said, this is our hypothesis and more research needs to be done to demonstrate. Like just because a paper says something doesn't mean it's automatically true. Essentially what they were doing is they were presenting the math and saying the math works, but we need to actually experiment and demonstrate it. So it's fine to do that.
Awful.
Well, no, that's fine. That's absolutely fine if you do that in a paper. But it's the fact that people can read it and completely miss that part because they're not trained in science. They're not trained to go, what's the difference between a theory and a hypothesis and a fact? What is the difference between those? If you have some kind of scientific training, you will know what a fact is versus a hypothesis versus a theory. But if you've never been trained in it, essentially they sound kind of like the same thing to you.
Especially in common parlance. Yeah.
Right. In fact, you'll sort of, maybe think that a theory is the weakest one of the lot when it's not. It's the best explanation for a set of facts that we could possibly have.
Would you maybe like to distinguish those for anyone in the audience who doesn't know what the different?
All right. So a fact is basically any natural phenomenon that's agreed upon kind of thing. So the fact would be, when you drop a pen, it falls. Right. It's just a fact. It's just what we all agree on happens in the world kind of thing. So it's the observation in your scientific process. A hypothesis is basically a question that is presented that suggests a reason for something. So a hypothesis is saying, hey, if the pen falls depending on the mass it's near, then gravity kind of thing. So it basically is a question designed to test whether something is true or not. So it's a proposed answer, if that makes sense. A theory is when that hypothesis fails to be falsified, and you can the facts back that conclusion exclusively. So it's basically the theory is the model that we come up with to explain the series of facts that have been presented and has been subject to all the scientific rigor we can basically throw at it, So gravity is a fact, things fall when you drop them. The hypothesis is that it is objects of mass causing that, and the theory is the model we have, starting with Newton's theory and then the theory of relativity, to describe our understanding of it.
And unfortunately, both of them are wrong.
Sorry.
Yeah. Hypotheses get falsified all the time. It happens.
Yeah, but Newton's theory of gravity is wrong, and the understanding
wrong. It's not really.
It's wrong. Incomplete.
Right, it is incomplete, absolutely. But what he describes, his model. Look, there's a saying that goes, "All models are wrong. Some of them are useful." Right. So it just means that the way that Newton described mathematically the way that things did fall towards one another was incredibly useful. It was accurate, but not as accurate as relativity. So when you get into, massive bodies like planets and stuff, it was not as accurate as it could have been.
It only works within a certain sphere of influence, which just happens to be the surface of this planet.
Yes.
Because it's a description of a set of events and observations. It's not a theory on the underlying causes or the grand mathematical principles that you'd use to determine those underlying forces.
It's valid over a lot more. It's valid over way more than just a few orders of magnitude, though. It's valid over a huge array of things. You have to look pretty hard, and you have to be Albert Einstein to figure out where and how it's wrong and how to do better. Newton, out of all 100 billion people on the planet who have looked around and thought about things, Newton comes in second place for understanding gravity. That's pretty good. I'm not going to say he was wrong.
He wasn't wrong per se, but the theory of gravity that he presented is wrong. That's what I was saying.
Yeah, but so is relativity then.
Yeah.
May I make an everyday analogy to the hypothesis theory fact idea?
Sure.
All right. It is a fact that adding milk to mac and cheese can make it tasty. It is a theory that adding this much will be enough to dissolve all the powder. It is a hypothesis that adding even more will make it tastier. And it is a fact that I added too much and it tastes terrible.
Bummer.
That's uniquely
Yeah,
American.
That makes me sad.
It makes me sad too.
Yeah,
Did you ruin your craft
so
dinner?
Sorry?
did you ruin
Did
your
you
craft
ruin your
dinner? I
craft
believe is
dinner?
Well, with enough ketchup, it should be okay.
You disgust
That's
me.
good. Look, I don't have a problem with ketchup. I don't. I must admit.
Really, I
Yeah,
think America should be put in the ocean for ketchup and Kraft mac and cheese and all the other abominations they've created. I'm for the fallen world hypothesis from the Bible just because of America and their horrible, horrible foods.
Well, I mean, Australians did give us Vegemite. Let's face it. Like, there's no innocent people here, sir.
Well, yeah, but
man, and how many
my
crimes
understanding is that
Britain
Vegemite
responsible
was.
for?
My understanding was that Vegemite was developed to ward off the drop bears, though, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
No, it's got a much more Australian explanation than that. It's just old yeast from beer factories. And Australia's, Lord knows, we love our beer. And it's just, that old yeast that we took and turned into zesty, salty spread. They actually feed it to cows a lot in Tasmania.
Look on the bright side. At least it's not systolic.
That's true.
Is that the fish from Norway? I think it is, and Norwegians the ones that do that.
It's the Scandinavian canned fish, the fermented Baltic herring.
Is it the one you bury in the dirt for like 3 months?
That's the one. Yep,
that's him.
Yeah, my girlfriend wants me to try that, but no.
Oh, no, try it.
Why?
Try everything once, man. Like, absolutely try it. Like, what's the worst that can happen?
I am open-minded, especially about my food, but something about that just makes me just no.
I'd rather have a devil's threesome, honestly.
Listen, I can barely handle sardines. I don't want to try them after
really?
a quarter year in the dirt.
Well, so did you say... Sorry, Mark.
No, go ahead, Bert. I wasn't saying anything important, mate.
This Theris Rex, did you say that you're geology or...
Yes, I was a geo major biominor. My university didn't have a paleontology major, so I had to compromise.
Oh, well, that's a shame, because paleontology is cool. Did you see Witsit's problem with the Grand Canyon dates and the sedimentary layers being... there's like hundreds of thousands of years missing?
I was the one that sent the super chats that started that.
Oh, of course, cool. So what's the cause of the missing time?
Well, it depends a bit depending on your region. I did a little bit of Googling to make sure I remembered it well, because freshman geology was like 3 years ago. But basically, starting a few 100 million years ago, most of the continents came together and formed a supercontinent. And when that happens, mountains start to grow. You can think of the Rocky Mountains or the Himalayas. When two pieces of the Earth's crust just kind of smush together, they squish up. And the thing about mountains is they essentially only erode. Like, you'll almost always just lose rock and soil from them. So it, over time, just completely erases any history that was recorded there.
Okay.
That's part of why in, like, say, a lot of dinosaur media, you almost never see dinosaurs in the mountains, because we have no, or next to no, evidence for any living there, because it was all erased. And the great unconformity is from about 1 billion to 500 million years ago, where a lot of that rock was just shaved away thanks to mountain building.
The great unconformity that he's actually talking about is actually from the flood basalt eruptions, not the one in the Grand Canyon.
from Flood Basalts. Were you the super chat that said flood basalts can take away layers? Or
Yes.
was that here?
That's I made that comment. It's more the aspect that they can, depending on the size of it. Like if you take something like the Siberian Traps, you lost nearly 3 or 4 kilometers of strata from that.
That can happen. You're definitely right. I thought he was just talking about the Grand Canyon one.
No, Witsit was being Witsit. He was
had a couple drinks, so I might not have caught everything. Just being candid here.
Witsit was being Witsit and grabbing it from left, right, and center, and not being coherent in anything that he says.
That would be why I missed it.
Yeah, Emmanuel, if you want to talk biblical slavery, just bring up the topic. It's just we sort of have traveled all over, because the debate sort of covered multiple topics, really. It went from biblical slavery to morality to gun control to all kinds of things, really. So we're really just following the debate. But if you want to bring up something on slavery, I'm more than happy for you to. That's not a problem.
Okay, so Mark, we spoke before about biblical slavery. And
Right.
I remember, you and I, we were like disagreeing about whether it's always wrong or not. So here, I'm trying to give you a scenario where it could be more morally correct, like
to own people.
Yeah, what I'm saying is the institution of slavery was necessary in the ancient world. That's what I was trying to say.
Okay. Necessary by what sort of standard do you mean? Like necessary as in like it had to happen?
Yeah, in a sense that if you see how the world, used to work, in the ancient world, we used to use we were very labor dependent. So before the industrial revolution, I think it was like necessary to use other people's labor. So wouldn't you just say that there might be immoral exceptions when it comes to this institution specifically?
I don't think so. No,
I don't think there's
it's
ever a
moral.
necessary or acceptable to treat people as property. Period.
Yeah.
Well, to own people and buy and sell them kind of thing. I mean, you could have sort of laborers that are paid a pittance in that society, and that would be a more moral society than sort of owning them as slaves.
What if you are at a war and you actually conquer those people and those people become captive? So would you say that in that situation, it might be morally correct to own them at a certain point?
Not as the Bible describes. The Bible generally describes killing all of the men, women, and male children, and leaving the girls that had not yet known a man, and taking them as plunder, or the women that had not yet known a man and taking them as plunder. So I think that's highly immoral. I think that you could go about it a lot better than that. You could sort of vassalize the nation, for instance, and have them work for you. I think that would be more moral than enslaving their sort of women for yourself. Wouldn't you agree?
What I would say is the Bible. I think in the Hebrew Bible, in the Old Covenant, I think it is saying that you can't enslave your fellow Hebrews for more than 7 years. I think it specifically allows you to buy
their
heathen
ear.
slaves. I'm sorry.
Unless you drive an awl through their ear on the doorpost. I do admit that. But you didn't... Sorry, just 1 second, Justin. I do apologize, mate. But you didn't actually address my question. Would making that country that you're at war with a vassal be more moral than killing everybody and taking the women that have not yet known a man for your own?
What I would say is what I would say is, if those people, those people are idol worshippers, so God was like punishing them through the Israelites. That's what the story is saying in that specific time. But the woman could be cleansed since they have not known man of the old covenant. That's what it's saying.
What does that have to do with anything?
No, what I'm trying to bring up different scenarios to make an exception of this practice, because I think you're saying that there is no exception to practice such a thing, and
Well,
there's the opposite side, an extremist
okay.
which might say that it is always correct. I'm kind of in the middle. I'm not saying that it is always correct. I'm not saying that it is always wrong.
Right. So would you say that morality is objective or subjective? Is it relative to the time and place?
I would say that morality is subjective for the most part.
So moral relativism. So something that could be moral back then would not be moral today.
Yeah, that was my point, because if we lived, in those ancient times, for example, I grew up, in Ethiopia, and there used to be a slavery practice until, there was a king that actually stopped chattel slavery. But I imagined living on those times where it was practiced, and I would say that it might be an exception.
Gee, I would think that God could maybe play the role of a great king and get rid of it.
Well, I mean, but okay, so the question then arises, what do you base your morality on? Where does your morality come from if it's subjective? Like, why isn't your morality just personal opinion?
What I would say is there are things that had to be done which are necessary for the time. So
why are they necessary?
I mean, they are necessary in a sense that we have to survive in that situation.
You don't think that people were going to be able to figure out how to survive without owning other people's property?
So, sorry, could I push back on this really quick?
Of course.
So you say that they needed to rely on slavery for the time. Is that correct? Did I hear you right?
That is what I'm saying.
Well, if God is all powerful, why could he not give the people at that time greater strength or ability or whatever, so they wouldn't have to rely on slavery?
So what I would say is, I mean, there are certain useful things that we could get out of that system. What I would say, for example, if they didn't go through those kind of things, I don't think they are able to grasp the concept of like hard work. For example, when they were in Egypt, they used to have like, Egyptian masters. So I think the Israelites have to go through that process where they have to learn patience and all those different things.
I mean,
knowledge and understanding isn't ancestral like that, though. It's not genetic.
Also, like, if I go to the gym and I lift a 40-pound weight 100 times, and let's say I'm just starting out, someone who's been there 2 years can still understand, oh, that's still a bit of effort. He's working towards it, while being able to bench 100 pounds 100 times. Like, you can be capable of great things while understanding that less great results are still strenuous.
I just have to ask this question because I don't have a lot of time. Can I just ask this question and you might answer this question? Am I allowed to ask?
Of course, Manuel. Just, we're just having a conversation. No problem at all.
Yeah, so I don't have a lot of time. So what I'm saying is, if we were in those situations where we didn't have any machines, we didn't have any kind of technology, how would we survive? How would we build a different civilization if those institutions didn't occur during that time?
There were sort of civilizations that didn't have slave labor. Maybe not at the time, but sort of even pre-industrialization, there was certain civilizations that didn't employ slave labor. Even tribal civilizations didn't have slave labor. They all pulled together for the good of the tribe, kind of thing. So we know that it definitely would have been possible to run a nation without slaves. But that was the common practice at the time. That was the accepted thing to do. It just wasn't going to cross their mind that it was the wrong thing to do. I think it's immoral because it wasn't in their best interest for their country. They would have made a lot more progress and flourished a lot more working with their neighbors rather than enslaving them, is sort of the point that I'm trying to get across. A god should know this, that his people would be better off working with others than enslaving them. But so the god either didn't want to tell them or just failed to tell them. So either way, it's still immoral because it doesn't progress their people towards the desired outcome that they had.
Thank you for answering my question. Maybe that's all I gotta say, but I still didn't concede my points. But it's okay. We could agree to disagree, I think.
That's okay. Sorry, I think I just got a super chat through. I do apologize, and thank you so much to Super Squid Soup Hunk, $5. According to Emmanuel, is slavery now immoral? When did that change and why, and how do we know? I'm sorry, Emmanuel's just ducked out, and that's okay. Thank you so much for coming in, Emmanuel. I appreciate that you had a little time. If you sort of believe in moral relativity, Squid, that's not a problem. So it's only if you sort of claim objective morality or moral realism that basically it can't change. If you simply believe that morality is a convention of the culture, then one thing can be moral ages ago and another thing can be immoral later or whatever. That's not a problem at all. It's just weird for sort of God to represent moral relativity. It's just a sort of position I don't run into a lot of people that believe in God, but that's okay. I mean, you can hold that position if you want.
Well, it's weird. It makes sense that God would give us free will, and then that free will would mean that morality would be contingent upon our will to use it. And it would still technically be an objective morality, but it would be based upon our culture and our societies. So I don't understand like the Calvinist position of morality is the will of God, and
so
God
has
yeah.
Yes, sorry, but I just say that's where you lose your moral authority, right? So how can you sort of say that God wants you to do, or you ought to do what God says, or ought to do what the Bible says, if morality is merely relative to the culture in which you live?
That's true. It'd be interesting to see a theist really delve into the idea that God's objective morality isn't a prescriptive thing, but a description of what the perfect Christian world should be, or would be, I should say.
Well, you could argue for moral anti-realism by sort of saying, hey, it's just subjective upon what God wants. So, and this is the sort of confusion that Witsit was running into, is trying to say objective and then sort of appeal to a stance-dependent thing, which even if it's God's stance, it's still subjective. But then that runs into the problem of, well, if it's just what God wants, then morality is entirely just a Machiavellian, who has might makes right, because God's just the most powerful. So you've got problems there as well. It's kind of a minefield trying to explain why God's morality is the one you should follow.
Yeah. I think of it as it could be that like the panpsychism position, that we're all sort of a set of souls interacting with some massive psyche. And if that were the case, we'd all be imparted with this sort of sense of morality, and then countering forces like hunger and, reproductive urges would push against that morality, making the morality just like an ideal that there are other forces can override. And then what you'd see is that as we produce more material, things like slavery would no longer be moral to do, because we no longer have that countering force to push against the objective morality of not owning people.
I got enough panpsychism from Jen the other day, but yeah, no,
That's why I
get
brought
what
it
you're
up.
saying. Yeah, thank you so much, because that's awesome. Yeah, so panpsychism, but if the universe is a mind, which is basically it's just one universal mind that we're all sort of partitioned parts of, then it still starts dependent, because it's the starts of the universe. Would that count? That's an interesting question, Bert. I'm so glad you brought that. Would that count as objective? If you sort of say, hey, the universe is this psychic connection of mind, that we're all sort of a reflection, or we're all sort of derivative of, then it would still be subjective. But if you're sort of saying that psychic thing is so what's the thing, there's a dilemma that I'm thinking of that sort of
is it Euthyphro?
Euthyphro dilemma. Thank you so much, Euthyphro. So the question would be, is that moral because the mind decides it so, or is the mind relaying what is objectively moral? And the two prongs are basically, well, if it's the mind deciding, then it's subjective. If it's coming from somewhere else, then you've just kicked the can down the road, because the mind isn't what's, moral. It's just reading off something else. So I think you could apply the Euthyphro to that one as well. Unless you sort of argue for some sort of divine simplicity, that the inherent nature of the universe and its will are the same thing, which is a whole other can of worms, to be honest with you.
That's what I was thinking.
Oh, really? Well, I'll read your mind. Yeah.
Yep.
Big Bad Mama for $2. Thank you so much. Love to Mark Reid, and love back Big Bad Mama. Big Bad Mama does some funny videos on Kent Hovind if you want to check them out, like Kent Hovind's House of Horrors. Some real good stuff in there. It's actually, and for some reason,
I've seen her a lot on Atheist Junior's streams.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Big Bad Mama gets everywhere. She's like a rash. It's grim. It's grim. But those videos are quite funny. And for some reason, he has this like few people doing choir, and they are the worst singers on the face of the planet. For some reason, they are his choir. I don't know why, but it is funny.
I think it's his own narcissism. He wants to be he wants to be the dad for the Jackson 5, but for Jesus.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. Well, I mean, Atheist Junior, that you brought him up, he had a great fire truck story for Kent Hovind. He was accused of sort of lurking around people's properties and things, and it was just a nightmare situation. You know, what are you doing? Like, you are such a weird old man. What are you doing? Like,
you just posted a video of Kent giving a lecture on sovereign citizen stuff from like 30 years ago, explaining how he cheated on all of his taxes and why he didn't.
Right.
Through the whole lecture of sovereign citizen stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, sovereign citizen stuff. I will never for the life of me understand sovereign citizen stuff. But someone was talking about sort of religiosity and flat Earth overlapping, and obviously Witsit's flat Earth. But I think that
I've been hoping.
It's okay. Go ahead.
So one of the things that I've been trying to do with a lot of my comments on Witsit's Flurf debates is to try to ask him questions to expose that. So one of my debate tactics is that I try to find sort of like a critical path at the base level of somebody's epistemology so that you can dismantle it from the bottom rather than from the top down. And if you can bring that as the core underpinning of to why he believes what he believes, and if you can't get from A to B because you can knock out the base layer at the start, then you can go back to talking about why your epistemology process is correct and how you get to that point, and then they have to play a lot of catch up. So that's a tactic that I like to pull. So if you pull that down, you can see that he believes in like giants and Nephilim and all this other stuff, and he doesn't know his own Bible and he doesn't know all these things.
Right.
And if
mean,
this is the reason why he believes in the firmament, and then he's just trying to, post hoc rationalize it with this like gross misunderstandings of science, you can just say, well, is this the real reason you believe this? And just cut his legs out,
I mean, that sounds like a great strategy, but especially considering Witsit as a debate partner, he'll just ignore what you say and continue to be the pigeon that shits all over the chessboard.
He reminds me of like Dark Dawkins in the way that he'll just, grossly throw fallacies incorrectly at you and use jargon the wrong way and continuously just sort of like fire hose that to just keep talking as much as he can so that you can't actually refute him. So that makes sense. But I think that in this debate, Skylar did a really good job of this.
Well, I was happy in my debate against, I think it was like, is NASA trustworthy or something against Witsit, because I got him talking, like, only for a very short amount of time, but I got him talking about sorcerers and, sun worshippers as, NASA. And that's kind of a victory, because when you dial it back, the real core foundation is this religious belief. It is based on religion. So yeah, I think Skylar did fantastic to get him on.
He did great.
Giants and angels and all of this stuff, because it really does show that the basis for his epistemology is not the Bible or sort of the paragraphs in it regarding how people are treated. His epistemology is reliant on his faith, and that is a untenable position to hold.
There was something
I thought your discussion with Darth Dawkins was one of the best I've ever watched, Mark. Honestly.
Completely agree.
Oh, thank you.
Completely agree. And I think that's probably how I found your content.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that. I did my best. I mean, it's really hard.
To add to that, a few weeks ago, you were in a debate with someone, Mark, and I made the pigeon playing chess analogy. Just wanted to be clear, that was about your partner, not you.
Look, if you want to think, I like people pointing out where I've gone wrong. People are like, oh yeah, I'm a expert in this field, and I hate to nitpick and stuff. And it's like, no, nitpick away. Like, seriously, if I've got something wrong, please tell me. That's the only way we get to know what we've gotten wrong. It's just I'm not going to go through life being scared of being wrong, because it's an opportunity to learn something new. So
and that's totally fair.
Away.
Most people are an expert on something, but nobody can be an expert on everything. And actually, speaking of that, you had a debate a while ago on dinosaurs where you did get a couple things wrong.
I like it, Justin. ChatGPT is an expert on everything. Yeah.
Like I remember you called Ankylosaurus a sauropod.
Yeah, and I know that's not right. Yeah. No, I must.
I figure you probably misspoke on that.
Probably, yeah. That's okay. I know that. I think I responded to your comment actually, Theros, but I really appreciate you pointing that out. It's just a sort of reminder of sort of, because that Ankylosaurus is my favorite dinosaur. I don't know why. It's just dumpy and has that bashing tail. I just really love it. And maybe I've played too much Ark. I'm not sure, but I just love that.
Okay,
one.
sorry. You became 100 times cooler now that I know you played.
Fantastic
Ark.
game.
Yeah. Although the new one, I'm not sure. Look, I'm getting derailed here into game. I'll stay on topic. So I know that the sauropods are like the Brachiosaurus and the Brontosaurus and things like that.
I see your comment now. I just checked my notifications.
Yeah. So it's the but you had a name for it that I haven't heard before. So I really want to thank you for bringing that up to me. Like, it's just stuff like that. It's stuff that,
It's the name of the group named after Ankylosaurus.
Oh, okay. Well, that makes a lot of sense. That doesn't, but that's the thing. Like, I want people to tell me if I do have something wrong. And here's the thing: I cannot promise not to make errors. I will make errors. Everybody makes errors. That's okay. Yeah, it's just, I do my best, and if I get something wrong, hey, tell me. That's fine. That's perfect.
And in debates, it's very easy to get stuff wrong because you're just mainly going off memory.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I was trying to throw Skylar a bone and through comments because Witsit kept talking about how the women were always able to consent in marriages. And I'm an ex-Jew, not an ex-Christian, and there aren't a whole lot of us who sit around this debate sphere. So OT is really more my space. So that's why I brought levirate marriages up. So there's multiple kinds of marriage in the Bible. And can I read a little bit of scripture to sort of contextualize this?
Yeah. So we didn't hear enough scripture. Skylar was doing all the heavy lifting on scripture, to be honest with you, which is what I said at the start. It was weird. I've never seen a Christian
I've never
debate.
seen that either. So
it's weird.
So this is a concept, and just to contextualize this exists in a few different cultures and a few different contexts around that era. And it's essentially a mixture of property stuff and passing on your familial lineage. And this is sort of like a really odd marriage construct. So if you want me to pick a different version of the Bible, I just threw Bible Gateway up. I grabbed NIV, just, couple, 5 lines real quick. So the concept of this is going to it's going to be immediately apparent as to why this cut Witsit's entire consent thing off. If brothers are living together and one of them dies without a son, his widow must not marry outside the family. Her husband's brother shall take her and marry her and fulfill the duty of a brother-in-law to her. The first son she bears shall carry on the name of the dead brother, so his name will not be blotted from Israel. However, if a man does not want to marry his brother's wife, she shall go to the elders in town and say, my husband's brother refuses to carry on his brother's name in Israel. He will not fulfill the duty of his brother-in-law to me. Then the elders in this town shall summon him and talk to him. If he persists in saying, I do not want to marry her, the brother's widow shall go up to him in the presence of the elders, take off one of his sandals, spit in his face, and say, this is what is done to the man who will not build up his brother's family line. That man's line shall be known in Israel as the family of the unsandaled.
Wow.
That's right there.
Wow.
So basically, so you could compel the spouse of your dead brother to marry you and give you a child.
This explains so much about
unless you say that you don't want to do it.
This explains so much about the growing categories on certain pornography websites. The ones that start with I.
I remember an H-type manga about this once.
Yeah. Look, if somebody ever comes up to you and sort of says, this stepbrother thing is all really disgusting, say, well, it's biblical. It's perfectly biblical.
So it's not even
God wants me to watch this.
So it's not stepbrother. It's your dead. So it's if you're the woman, it's your dead husband's brother.
And that would be your brother-in-law.
Yeah. That would be your brother-in-law, not your stepbrother.
You're right. It's not stepbrother. You're correct. Yeah.
But it's still really screwed up.
Oh yeah. Is this in the Old Testament?
Yeah, this is. Yeah. So just to give you the verse and whatever, this is Deuteronomy 25, 5-10. And that was why I gave the verse in the comment, because I was hoping since Skylar had been reading scripture, he'd pull it up and they would be able to just nail Witsit on it. So that's why I threw that comment up.
Well,
I think there's currently a court case in one of the red states in the US about banning the Bible in public schools because it's so sexual. And I think it's verses like that, like you can marry your in-law, your sister-in-law, or she has to marry you.
It's probably Song of Solomon, actually. It's basically just biblical, written porn. Basically, it's very suggestive.
Bible erotica.
Normally, I'm against almost everything read, but please, anything to get that book out of schools.
Well, considering it has the verse where you're allowed to rape a unwed woman and you just have to pay her father, was it 30 shekels? And then she's yours for life.
Is it even
Yes.
30?
I don't remember.
30 might be after inflation.
So this whole idea that war captives, and Witsit sort of mentioned at one point, war captives, they weren't taken involuntarily. There was actually a waiting period to give the woman whose husband had been killed by the troops a mourning period before you actually married her, kind of thing. Captured women. Yeah, I can't remember the verse. I'll look it up. But there was a verse that basically said you had to let them mourn for a certain amount of time.
It was a month, and then they had to cut their hair and shed their clothes, and then you could compel them to marry you.
So it's Deuteronomy again, because Deuteronomy is one of the most awful books that has ever been written, because of course it is.
Man.
Yeah, so when you go, it's Deuteronomy 21:10. When you go to war against your enemies and the Lord God delivers them into your hand and you take captives, if you notice among the captives a beautiful woman attracted to her, you may take her as a wife. And that's what Skylar read out. Bring her into your homes, have her shave her head, trim her nails, put aside the clothes she was wearing when captured, after she has lived in your house and mourned her father and mother for a full month. Because don't forget, you've just slaughtered her father and mother in the war because she's a captive, right? Then you may go to her and be her husband, and she shall be your wife. If you are not pleased with her, let her go wherever she wishes. You must not sell her or treat her as a slave, since you have dishonored her. But that's the whole point. You can still, like, nowhere in there does it say, hey, she gets a choice.
So to hop back for a second, just to hop back for a second, where you were talking about like how graphic, aspects of the Bible are. There's a really, if you haven't seen it, there's a really fantastic book called The Book of Genesis, illustrated by R. Crumb.
That's horrifying.
R. Crumb's insane. He's a horny man.
And it has this giant thing on the front that says adult supervision recommended for minors, and it is like an extraordinarily literal depiction of Genesis through comic, and it is incredibly horrifically graphic and inappropriate.
I think R. Crumb's the guy with the obsession for very tall, very big, like Amazonian women in his artwork. So it's always like some tiny guy being carried by a woman and then allusions towards sex.
Hey, as someone who's dating a person, I don't know, 8 inches taller than me, do not besmirch tall women, okay?
I'm not doing it. I think
besmirching tall women.
No, I've got a very short wife. I'm a tall guy. So I think if I was to date again, it would have to be someone at least my height, just so the spooning can be somewhat reciprocated.
I don't know, man. Backpacking isn't so bad.
I wanted to get to this gun thing. So I had a discussion with someone else. His name's Demon Stride. He's on that Tartaria server. And he's an interesting, nice guy. And we had a debate on gun control. And a lot of it was from my position of an Australian. And since we've had and have gun control, we don't seem to have the same problems that America has. And then some of the research within America about gun stats. And Witsit was actually moderating that for us, which was interesting because he's an incredibly biased moderator. But they sat there with the different crime stats between Australia and, the US. And this knife crime thing, he should actually know because we discussed that. And then we also discussed the death rates and the childhood mortality rate, which is the most devastating statistic I think I've seen come out of the US in a long time.
The US, yeah, that's horrifying.
But their argument sort of hinged upon the idea that property crimes in Australia are very high, as well as rape in Australia are very high compared to the US. But that's because, well, I think burglaries, as in breaking into someone's house, is higher in Australia, but rape's definitely very, very high. Which, yeah, there's a designation, and this is a problem they came up against, between violent and then like the non-violent, as much as you can have that, forms of rape. So in Australia, we'll sort of have a girl that will drink too much or take an illicit drug, pass out at a party, and, you know, she'll be raped, which is horrible, and we should do something about it. And in America, what they'll have is they'll have a lower amount of that, but then they'll have a higher amount of, you know, people actually physically holding down women in order to rape them. So they sort of intentionally left that off until I went into the statistics for different crime rates. And I looked at what they were looking at, and about a line down from what they'd been discussing was this violent, both property crime as well as rape statistic, which kind of shows that in the US, access to guns means that you can do more violence to people. It's not like, you know, they're passed out on the couch or the house is empty and you break in. If you actually go in with the gun or physically assaulting someone, just because the general background violence in that society is so high.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I get what you're saying, but...
And welcome, Gek.
I don't know.
Just 1 second, Theros. I do apologize. Sure. If Gek, you have got anything to say, just jump in, mate. I'm sort of running it pretty casual today.
Oh, thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. Yeah, I was going to say...
right after.
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought that the whole gun thing was crazy, because you look up, like, knife deaths, and U.S. is really high up on that, too. So I was like, what? There's no there. Like, what are you even saying? So the U.S. is even worse? Like, so we got highest gun deaths, and we're pretty high up there on knife deaths too. So if you don't got a gun, it's okay, because, you know, we're still stabbing people anyway. That doesn't, like, the arguments were so fallacious. And
are you trying to say America shouldn't be number one?
How dare you?
I am.
Theros, what did you want to say, mate? What did you want to say?
Just to kind of add to what Bert was saying. I mean,
yeah,
you can debate whether or not violence in different cultures takes different forms, but I believe there's been an order of magnitude or more or less mass stabbings or mass druggings in Australia than there have been mass shootings in America over any given time period.
What? There have been more mass stabbings in Australia than mass shootings in America?
Less mass stabbings and or druggings by an order of magnitude than there have been
I
shootings
misheard.
in America.
Yeah, you're completely correct about that. Like, we're just a less violent society overall.
Oh, I've got to apologize. Super Squid Hunk actually sent in an earlier super chat. I'll try to find it to put it on the screen. I do apologize. I did kind of missed that at the start.
I basically just said that I missed most of the debate. I came in at the very tail end, so I was hoping someone could recap some of Witsit's arguments just about slavery specifically.
No problem, Squid Super Hunk, for $5. Sorry, I'm trying to get in the habit of doing that. I'm very new to the streaming scene, so reinforce. I missed most of the debate. Someone give me a brief summary of what stars specifically rape. I'm glad you put that, because I would have gone on about gun control and stuff. Okay, so basically his arguments, briefly summarized, were that the verse in Exodus, Exodus 21, that says that you are not to kidnap people, excludes all forms of slavery, was his main argument, that because you couldn't kidnap, there was no slavery being done. I think pursuant to that, he was kind of, he said a lot about how there were rules around the release of slaves. There was sort of servitude, but not slavery, I think, was one of his arguments. But most of it did seem to hinge around, because you couldn't steal a person, then slavery wasn't actually a thing. If anyone's got anything else to add, more than happy.
Not only that, so that particular line of Exodus 21:16 was the only line of scripture he quoted the entire debate, as far as I can remember.
Correct, yeah.
I mean, also, what do you call a servant that can't leave your house? A teenager.
Wow, hot take. Well, I mean, you sort of look at it's kind of weird because if you look at the definition of a slave today, we consider indentured servitude to be slavery. You know, it is a form of slavery because people can be coerced into it. So I think Skylar brought up the coercion with the a person getting their ear pierced with an awl, because if somebody's a slave and they have a wife with them that came into slavery with them, they leave with the wife. If you give them a wife while they're a slave, like for instance, you've got two slaves and then you say, hey, here, have this slave as your wife. When they leave, they have to leave the wife and children behind as slaves. So that's the kind of thing I wish Skylar had sort of, harped on, because he's like, oh, you can't steal people. No, but if you have two slaves and they have a child, that child is born into slavery. They don't choose it. They're born into slavery. So one of his arguments that slavery was entirely voluntary, it was an agreement between two people kind of thing. That idea that a child of two slaves automatically becomes a slave precludes that notion. They don't have a choice.
So in his debate about whether or not biblical slavery was immoral, his argument was more or less biblical slavery didn't exist?
That sort of was the tact he was leaning for, yeah.
Interesting strategy.
Yeah, well, I mean, it is very, very odd strategy. I mean, Skylar sort of missed a few passages I would have expected him to really hammer home, like the one I think you brought it up, Justin, about beating your slave, or it might have been somebody else. Somebody did bring it up today.
No, I'm pretty sure I brought that up too. Yeah, that's what is that? 21:12.
Yeah. 21:20, I think it is. Exodus 21:20. I'll double check that.
Oh, sorry. I might be wrong. Yeah, not sure.
Yeah, 21:20. But yeah, I mean, we know the passage. It's sort of, if your slave doesn't die within a day or two, then you
Geology brings that one up all the time. Yeah.
Right, and it just shows the immorality of sort of. So if you're unfamiliar, a rod is sort of a short, sort of blunt instrument that they use for herding sheep. Like if you look into what the staff and the rod is, the staff is the one with the crook in it, and the rod is like a club. It is literally a club. It's not like a very, very small, weak thing. It is something that's made of heavy wood. So the amount of damage you can do to somebody without killing them with that thing is significant. Like I would never want to be under the rod. And what's even more horrifying is one of the verses is sort of spare the rod and spoil the child. Like they're literally talking about beating their children with this thing. So I don't know how you can sort of lean into that and say, hey, yeah, that's moral. That's moral. I mean, what kind of servant can you beat with a club?
One that you own, one that's your property.
Well, sure, but then at that point, it's not really a servant anymore. It's more, a slave, essentially. Right. Especially because you're not paying them.
May I respond to a comment that was towards me a while back?
Of course.
It's on a slightly lighter note, but basalt can form new layers, and it definitely does. But what it often does is either erodes or metamorphizes the layers it touches. For example, I remember in one of my geology classes, there was a picture of a lava flow that had hit Yellowstone, and you could just see how it had partially melted the rock beneath it and changed it. It was actually kind of cool to see. That was to GG. It was a while ago, but it's kind of been bugging me.
Well, Beamsy, who was in earlier, his field is geology, and he knows a lot. In fact, he talks to me. I've got no idea what he's going on to, but he does sound very convincing. So, I do lots of love Beamsy.
Yeah, he seems cool. I mean, he knew what Coming Tonight
Yeah.
was, so that's awesome.
Yes, that is hilarious. He did share that with me. So, if you don't know, Coming Tonight is the most hilarious rock you'll ever see, and it is literally that's how it's pronounced. Now, it was originally, the rock was named because it was discovered near Cummington in England, and so it was called Coming Tonight. And so the context did not exist. I believe it was in the 1800s sometime, sort of, it was discovered. They did not have the same context as modern day. But I'm just glad it exists, quite frankly. I just find it hilarious.
Yeah, man, there's a ton of stuff like that. Like, one of the officially first described dinosaurs was the bottom end of a femur, which just so happened to look like a giant pair of testicles. You might be able to guess what it was described as.
Wow. Well, speaking of giant testicles, the giant stuff today was just so bizarre.
Yeah.
Like, just so bizarre. I mean,
the whole P.T. Barnum history of like those giants and mermaids being found by archaeologists is really interesting. It's insane, but interesting. Like the Stone Down Man or something like that. And essentially, it's just they faked the whole thing. It's just because fossils resemble rock so much, they just got rock, made it look like human bones vaguely, buried it in the ground, and then dug it up later and said, "Hey, look, everyone, there's obviously a skeleton here of giants, so Bible must be true."
That's an interesting question. Sorry, I just saw something in the chat. I'm sorry, I'm trying to pay attention. Do you think that the US population could beat the US military? Absolutely not. There is no way. There is no way that the US population could. The US military, I mean, like, how far do you carry this? The US military has drones, they have missiles, they have tanks, they have nuclear weapons. I mean, there is no conceivable way that if there was war between the population and the military, that the population would win. The whole point is that they won't get to that because it's unlikely for the military to turn on the US population and, sort of slaughter them wholesale. That's not sort of like, if the government tried to do that, you would probably see an uprising of the military against the government, not, slaughter the entire people. That wouldn't happen. But the whole idea... Well, just one sec there, because I talked to this guy who sort of was trying to argue not only should, and this was Kevin something biblical studies, he was just like, he basically argued that the citizens should have all access to all of the weapons that the military do, including rocket-powered grenades, bazookas, tanks. He said that the citizens should have access to tanks.
How does he feel about nuclear weapons?
I mean, listen, I grew up
anything
in Iowa.
Anything the government has access to, the citizens should have access to.
Field.
Sorry?
I grew up in Iowa. You have any idea how many farmers would love to napalm their neighbor's field?
No idea. I presume that's
at least 10.
At least like 30%.
I think
right.
I could be wrong about this. I looked it up ages ago. But this idea of the US citizens beating the US Army, you're right, Mark. That's just not what that says, or not true in any way. What the feasibility study looked into was whether they could occupy the United States. Like the US military could be an occupying force, similar to like a foreign invader of the same size with the same military equipment and training. Could they occupy the US if there was no US military to fight back? And the answer, of course, is no, because it's 330 million people, guerrilla warfare, massive amount of land, huge cities. Like, it's just impossible to occupy that. But again, they could just drone it to the ground and kill the whole population.
Yeah.
Ooh.
But that would never happen because, the military are citizens. They have families. They any government saying, hey, bomb your own population, I think that would be the end of that government kind of thing. We in current democracy, we kind of rely on this idea that the military protect the people, not necessarily the government. So, and maybe that would be up in the air for certain parts. But, I don't want to talk for America, but I know Australia, that would never happen.
No.
The soldiers do not fight for the government. They fight for the people.
We definitely don't have that same cult of personality wrapped around our leadership, though, which is a damn good thing.
It's always made me, and I'm very sorry if I'm sort of insulting the Americans and the US people, but it's always, I don't understand the sort of, power put in the hands of a president. It seems way out of control. It seems like too much.
It's supposed to be pulled away, and it's supposed to be split across multiple houses of government. But over time, these things have evolved and changed a little bit.
Right.
Oh no! Don't use the E word.
That was last night's debate.
What was the debate?
I said the word evolve.
Oh, okay, yeah, gotcha. Okay, yeah. Yeah, that was interesting. Was that which one was that? Was that the one with Jen and
Teacup and T-Rock?
And T.
Oh man, that was painful.
One goes up, the other goes down.
I mean, I did a after show on that as well, and Jen. Look, I love Jen, but her stuff, like that anus to mouth stretching was gold. I couldn't. Is
she just a troll?
No, Jen's not a troll.
Because I wasn't sure if she was a troll. I missed the debate. I only was there for the comments, so I put a bunch of super chats up, and then I was over in your after show.
No, Jen's actually really nice. She's a really nice person. As long as you sort of don't insult her intelligence, because she's actually quite smart. But I disagree with everything she says, like completely disagree. But I like her. She's actually very, very nice once you get to know her. But
she seemed interesting. But
she's got some really
as soon as you
stuff.
delve into physics and mathematics to explain away the natural world, I just cannot keep up.
But she makes some math and physics arguments that, like, if you've taken even like lower undergrad math and physics classes, you can like really completely just tear apart.
Listen,
yeah,
man,
well, I mean, she
man.
says she's got a honors. Well, she says she's got an honors in physics, mathematical physics. So I don't know. I have no idea.
How come she doesn't understand stochastic processes? Like,
well, she might do, but it could just be like a denial, because it would be something that would undermine her theory, her view of reality.
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of that going around, to be honest with you. I mean,
yeah, that's why I deny all measurements on measuring tapes, because there's a certain thing I measure routinely that I have a very set number for that measuring tapes keep disagreeing with.
I don't know, but the mushrooms under my bed say she's wrong, so they're refuted.
Yeah. Well, but she's nice to talk to. She's really nice to talk to. So, I kind of encourage you to talk to because she's actually really nice once you get to know her. But yeah, this just her stuff is just baffling to me. I don't see how she gets to where she gets to. Because I mean, in the Aftershow, she kind of said, like I said, when she brought up the fallibility of sensors, which is a fair point, right? The sensors are fallible. We know that they're not 100% accurate. We absolutely know this. I sort of talked about, well, we've got to use them to interact with one another. I mean, you can't talk to people with your mind. And she's like, well, you haven't learnt yet. And I'm like, oh, whoa, okay. Apparently I could learn, but it will take years, and I've got to believe sort of first kind of thing. So
she lost me with the whole not being able to experiment about finding already occurred things.
Right. So I think we got that sorted out in the after show, that the prediction was the event of finding something, right? So she's kind of thinking, well, if something exists in the past and you say, hey, that thing existed in the past, it's not a prediction. But I guess what I pointed out was that if we don't know about it and we predict that we will know, like we will find it, we will discover that, and that comes true, that's a prediction. So I think we kind of, she was sort of thinking that, you know, when you look backwards, we say, okay, well, that should be there when we already know about it, which of course is not a prediction, right? Because if something is there and you say, okay, well, my model explains why it's there, that's not a prediction. And I think T-Jump's trying to get across, well, if we don't know about it, that is a prediction. But we're not predicting its existence, we're predicting us finding it. And I think that would have cleared things up.
Yeah, and that was based on my super chat, which was fun.
Yeah, like there are some really getting that you like to, you know, throw some real, you know, wrenches into the cogs on these things.
I am Satan's lawyer for sure.
Oh, look, I can only encourage you. That's awesome. Like, seriously, throw wrenches. I've thrown my share in my day as well, mate. Don't worry about that.
At least as far as I could see, they never really put up a refutation to what I asked. Like, essentially, for anyone who didn't see, what I said was, our model has put forth these predictions, and I listed a few extinct genera, and I said, how do you account for this? Like, based just on our knowledge of the modern world and population dynamics, we figured these things must exist in these rock layers from this time. And I guess adding a bit of geology in there. I believe I listed Archaeopteryx, Australopithecus, and Tiktaalik.
Yeah. And it's not so much even the rock layers, it's between these fossils. So like between, I mean, I hate to use the fish basically, because there's all kinds of, fish is not an exact term, like lobed fishes basically, and land tetrapods. There has to be a fish with stiff limbs and a rudimentary lung system, right? It's between those two. So we say, hey, that's going to be in this rock layer because that's where we find fossils from those different stages of evolution.
Yes. So the discovery of Tiktaalik was really interesting. Feel free to just Google Tiktaalik if you're interested. There's a nice website that beautifully outlines this. But basically, we already had two fossil specimens. We had Acanthostega and Ichthyostega and a bunch of others. These were all fish that had sort of amphibian features. And we knew what types of rocks they were found in. We figured, okay, we want to find an intermediary. So just using what we know of evolution, where should this be? We predicted it should be in, I believe it was Devonian strata, in a marshland / estuarine environment. And then we just had to figure out where the good outcrop for that was. And it turned out to be in Canada. Neil Shubin and colleagues went out there for a couple expeditions, didn't find anything. And then bam, 3 different individuals of the exact kind of species they were looking for with all the intermediary traits. It was just stunning.
And so it was between Ichthyostega and
Acanthostega, I believe. Could be a little bit wrong on that. I will admit, could be a little off.
No, that's okay. I'm just looking at a picture now because if you say interested, I'm interested. It is impressive, the amount of stuff they got right about it. And that's the kind of prediction that we're kind of talking about. And Archaeopteryx was definitely the other one with the unfused wing fingers.
Unfused wing fingers, toothed beak, and a long tail, I believe, were most of the predictions Darwin made about it. And then it was less than 2 years, I know, after the publication of On the Origin of Species, it was found. Like, as a scientist, you can hardly ask for a better thing to be found.
Right.
Like, I can only imagine how great he must have felt about that.
Right. Vindication. Yeah, and this is the kind of predictions, and what was really disheartening was sort of the waving off of it by T-Rock kind of thing. That he goes to the Kent Hovind school of creationism, which is kind of the really. I've debated him before, and some of the stuff he says is just sort of the level of ignorance he has is just incredible.
I mean, with Kent, honestly, I genuinely cannot tell if it's actual ignorance or if he's just continuing to put on an act for money. Because
it's for sure him just
all
acting.
The years, I'm pretty sure it's an act. But
we've seen again and again, like every time he has a debate with someone who's good at this and has watched previous debates, he'll say his, mosquitoes to your, a mosquito, your ancestors a mosquito, you came from a mosquito.
You're related to strawberries, yeah.
I mean,
every single time, and I know you did this, Mark, every single time it'll be, no, we've been through this. You have a common ancestor with them. You're not related to them. You didn't come from them. There is some common ancestor between you and a mosquito. It will be some form of multicellular organism, probably.
I mean, also, and if I may, I think Dapper Dinosaur, if you know of him, I think
he's amazing.
He made the perfect refutation of Kent's arguments.
Well,
all he said for his argument was, these are anatomical features of dinosaurs, and these are anatomical features of birds. They're the same, thus birds can be categorized as dinosaurs. That's all his argument was. And then Kent spent the entire rest of the discussion just going off on evolution when Dapper explicitly said that's not what he's arguing.
Right. Yeah, and I've known, like, I used to be a young Earth creationist, and the conversion was when I was in high school. Like, the church I was at passed out all of Kent Hovind's DVDs, and we watched them to go to sleep at night.
I'm so sorry.
I'm not kidding. I was indoctrinated for like 6-7 years. It took me a long time into adulthood to like unbrainwash myself. So like,
congratulations,
all talking
that's
points,
rough. Yeah.
Like I know them really well, because he's like, you should watch my DVDs. I was like, I've seen every single one of them dozens of times, and it's the same argument all the time. He talks about in his DVDs, like he talks about the methods he uses, which is ironic. Like he will quote Hitler. I don't know if Hitler actually says this. He'll talk about people believe a big lie rather than a little lie, and he's the one telling the lies. Like he's saying, this is how I do it. He talks about brainwashing, and he explains how he's brainwashing people. Yeah. And I was like, you are the biggest con in the world. And he has no idea. That messed me up for years. Like I was crazy zealous from that, messed up a lot of relationships with my family members that to this day I haven't been able to repair. Lots of issues. Like the stuff he does hurts people. It really does.
If I have to give Kent credit for one thing, it's that he is great at instilling in people excuses to explain away actual science and actual research that their mind can just instantly go to anytime they're challenged on something they believe in.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, he is very charismatic, and he says it with such conviction, and he has a way of saying things. He has a way of The guy's charismatic. I won't take that away from him. But all his talking points are so old, and they've been disproven so many times that even Answers and Genesis and other creation, I think even his son's creation ministry has like moved away from him, because it's just the same things that he learned when he went to a specific Bible college in 1972. It's all the same talking points if you go back long enough, and he's just using the same things over and over and over again. Unfortunately, he still has a big following. There's still churches that still hand out his DVDs and talk about what he does, and you see it all the time on the debates with people who aren't Kent Hovind. They use his same arguments, the same talking points constantly.
Mm-hmm.
And you can spot them a mile off. You know, they are so recognizable. I do have to give Kent Hovind that he is effective at debate. He definitely is. He is very good at certain tactics and strategies that make it very difficult. He is slippery as, like, trying to pin him down is like trying to nail jelly to a wall. It is very, very difficult to get him to stay on topic, which is ironic because he kind of accuses everybody and their dog about not staying on topic, and then he'll change it or bring up 5 topics and stuff like that. So his tactics are very good. I wouldn't say they're very honest, but they're very good. They're very effective. His way of saying something he knows is very triggering and contentious, like, oh, you believe that you came from a strawberry kind of thing, or an amoeba or something. It leads people to chase that thing that made them angry, like that. You go, no, that's not right, but what he does it to is when you say something that pins him, that you know, like when you start to ask, what is a kind? What does this mean? How do you categorize? He'll go, well, you think you're related to a pine tree, and then people will follow that bait down there, and you've gone way away from the original point you were trying to make. And it's effective. I've been the victim of it many times. Like, don't get me wrong. I won't debate Kent anymore. I think that he is. I think, you know what? It annoys me. What really annoys me, and I'm really sorry to bring this up in the after show, but it really annoys me that he is my most watched videos. Like, by far, there's no comparison. By far, it annoys me because I don't want to give him more air, and I won't debate him because he has been convicted of domestic violence. He's appealing it. Just, you know, all cards on the table, he is appealing it. So I can't say he's guilty, but he has been convicted and is appealing it. The stuff that's come out, especially sort of since I met Atheist Junior, who's amazing and covers it really well. Actually, I might grab his website for everybody else, YouTube. But yeah, I just cannot feel that I'm a moral person and still engage with this man. I can't. I'm sorry. You know, I'm sorry if you want me to chase down Kent Hovind. I can't feel like I'm a moral person and help him peddle his crap, quite frankly.
Yeah, I agree. It's not worth giving him the time, because he's gone ego out the wazoo, and just we're just giving him more of what he wants by engaging with him, because all the great arguments have been made. And as you say, he's super slippery. You know, I've seen them from you see Gutsit Gibbons' amazing debate when she talked about it, really dived in and couldn't get him to stick to the details. Professor Dave really went at him, wouldn't let him, like, no, we're not shifting topics. We're staying on this one thing. You know, and what was his response? Check the time. Like, as soon as he was cornered on anything, he's dominating the time. It's like, no, explain this. Because he doesn't know. He doesn't know. And he's not going to give anything new. Right. And he doesn't want to learn the answer. It's all just a show to him. He's all about just showmanship and one-upmanship and how can I get you in a gotcha question. And that's all it is.
I mean, I could be off on this, but I feel like Kent's basic strategy and all of his copycats mostly boil down to he will gish gallop until you make him stop. Once you make him stop, he will slip into a different topic anytime you try to See if he knows what he's talking about.
I
And
love
then,
Kent
as
Gish
a
galloping.
last
I
resort,
love that.
As a last resort, he'll just have his pet audience laugh at you. Like, once he tries to do that, I feel like he has fully lost the debate.
So Gish Gallop's a double-edged sword in debate, and I love it when Kent Gish gallops because I can keep up and I can make notes on every like really I take notes, like, let's pardon the pun, religiously kind of thing. Like, everything is noted down when I'm in a debate. Like, everything, doesn't matter how big or small it is. It's just my way of doing it. So if Kent fires off 5 topics, I will address all 5 topics. And then what's hilarious is Kent going, "You're Gish galloping," and me going, "You brought up every point I covered." That's hilarious to me. I find it so funny when that happens. I love it when he Gish gallops because I can fire back. And Witsit tried the same with me and then said, "You're Gish galloping," and it's like, you brought up every topic I'm covering. Like, you've Gish galloped, and then when I cover your topics, it's because the people that employ that tactic, they don't keep up with their own arguments. They'll just spit them out one by one. So if you can actually cover every argument, it doesn't work. And in fact, it's the person that brought them up that's going to get lost and confused.
It's like they look out for trigger words rather than actually follow the conversation. Whereas you, Mark, you'll follow the conversation and follow the topics. So they're just looking for any trigger word that can lead them down their different layers, their onion of uncertainty that they like to build.
I think for some that's definitely true. That's 100% true. But I don't think without some kind of aid of some sort, like note-taking or visual cues or something, you can keep track of 5 different topics in the middle of the debate. Like, if you can, kudos to you, because I can't without actually, noting each one down. There's no way I could. That's impossible.
Yeah, I don't think they do. I think they just they want one thing that they can Gish gallop on about.
Yeah, and my debate, when I had the debate on flat Earth with Witsit, and this was like 3 years ago now, like the entire debate, I just kept bringing it back to what evidence would you accept, to like what would challenge your belief, and we spent over an hour and a half with never getting an answer, just changing the subject. And I was like, let's get back to this, and that's all it is, just Gish gallop. Well, what about air in a container? How is the? And I was like, we're not talking about atmospheric pressure. I said, what is the evidence you would accept? You don't accept videos, you don't accept measurements, you don't accept this. You say that you have to do everything yourself, but when I ask you for evidence, you point me to flat Earth videos that other people did. I said, wait, first, that's a video.
Ooh,
I thought we didn't believe in videos here. Second, somebody
fucked up. Sorry. I'm just making a comment on the standard. Yeah, just making a comment on the standard that the person gave your way, and the way you could just kind of throw it in their face was not. That was something that person really should have thought hard about before throwing that out there. But go ahead. Sorry.
Right. Well, that was I was very cordial, and it was my first debate on MDD, and it was kind of like, what are you trying to say here? And then he asked me about atmospheric pressure, and I was like, well, I'm not an atmospheric pressure, like, I don't study that. And he's like, well, you're not an expert. It's like, you don't study atmospheric pressure. Where's your degree in that?
But he knows everything, Gek.
And then he's going to tell you that you're using a credential fallacy.
Right. That came up. But what was his citations? Because you remember his citations, like the people that he talked to. Does anyone remember his Hebrew, his Jewish scholar?
Yeah, some guys he chatted to on Discord.
Yeah, he was like, Jack. I know a guy. Trust me,
Jack.
He's been doing it for 15 yeas. Like that.
Haven't you heard of the noted eminent scholar Jack from Discord?
I had a discussion with him once, and he brought up
peerless scholar.
I had a discussion with him once, and he brought up that he had like some doctor that he'd spoken to that had some information on germ theory and how it's false. And so I did the thing everyone does, which is you ask for the name, and then he can't give the name. So you say, okay, well, I spoke to 5 doctors the other day that said the exact same thing. Does that make me right or you right?
Right. And I asked him the same thing in the debate I had with him 3 years ago. I asked him, how do you differentiate? This is what a bunch of experts say, right? And you're saying you don't trust them. But there's this one fringe person you found that may or may not be an expert, but they say the thing that seems to line up with your belief. Why do you believe them? And I never.
Well, it sounds like someone really needs to explain an appeal to ignorance fallacy, and how, if you're going with consensus science with the experts who are in a particular field, like let's say on air pressure and shit, or climatology or whatever, yeah, that's not necessarily an appeal to ignorance. So just want to point that out. They might want
actually, that's an interesting. Sorry, that's
authority,
or not appeal to ignorance, appeal to authority. I'm sorry, wrong one. Appeal to authority. It's,
right. He'll say appeal to authority a lot. When
if you're appealing, like if I appeal to like 5, if I'm talking about theology with somebody and I appeal to 5, let's say we're talking about something in the New Testament and I'm citing 5 New Testament theologians, that's not an appeal to authority, because that's not what an appeal to authority fallacy is. In this particular case, those 5 individuals that I'm agreeing with, given their consensus issue or their consensus study on a particular theological study, makes them an expert in that field. So that's not an appeal to authority fallacy. Like an appeal to authority is like any authority can be used to kind of like, if the person was a chiropractor and then was trying to like, well, I'm a chiropractor, so I know all about this kind of stuff, and God exists, and you go, that's not how you get there, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Composed to like a handwriting expert who examined Genesis and said, based off the handwriting analysis, this looks like this was written by more than one person wrote this book.
Right.
You know, but he would probably call that an appeal to authority.
Like,
certainly.
The appeal to authority argument is something I just don't get a lot of the time. Because, like, personally, I want to try to get Witsit in a debate about the age of the Earth. And for my sources, I would want to cite a couple interviews I have with.
But don't you feel like
I've known, who are
don't you feel like you're just
cited and peer reviewed?
Well, I'm sorry, but aren't you just basically psyching yourself up to strap on some ice skates to go ice skating uphill? You know, like that famous line from Blade. Some motherfuckers are always trying to ice skate uphill. Because I mean, it seems like you're wanting to do that with him. Like he's already doing it, and you're strapping on ice skates to following up that ice skate uphill kind of thing. I mean, or I'm sorry, maybe I'm just being a dick here, but
because as far as
I actually wanted to talk about this idea of like talking to Witsit and talking to Kent Hovind.
Theros finish. Sorry, Bert. Just let Theros finish. Yeah, and I'll go to you straight after, mate.
No worries.
I want to give it a try because as far as I've seen, granted, no one has really gone after him on this aspect of his beliefs. So I feel like if I can just show with point of evidence after point of evidence that he's just wrong, it might help convince some of his followers to look more into the science.
But out of curiosity, is he kind of one of those people that might go like is this person a flat earther?
Yes, and he also made fun of me tonight for not having a bottomless wallet.
He's like the Darth Dawkins of flat earthers.
Oh, okay. Really, because the thing is like most flat earthers, at least I've only engaged with maybe like 3 or 4 of them. When they really get cornered, they basically start talking about NASA as like an agent of Satan and how it's out there to basically draw everybody away from God.
Well, NASA didn't come up in this debate. I got to admit,
really?
NASA didn't come up at all in this debate. Yeah, it was.
Sweet.
So that's a win. Bert, what do you have to say, man?
Yeah, I'm just going to run off in a sec, so I just want to say thanks. But
sure.
I wanted to talk about this idea of there seems to be more like a growing collection of people like you, Mark, that are willing to go out and debate the creationism, evolution, flat earth, all these like weird pseudosciences that 20 years ago would sort of go unchallenged every day. It'd just be rare occasions where there'd be a debate. And it seems to me that there's certain topics that just aren't being debated anymore that used to be debated. So things like, I haven't seen a good debate on gun control publicly for a long time, but that was big like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And same with climate change. Like the last good climate change debate I saw that had anyone of any note in it was with Vosh and some climate skeptic dude. And you just don't see that. And I think that's part of the good thing about, you know, again, going and talking to Kent Hovind and talking to Witsit and debating them again and again on these topics is that it has a chilling effect where new people will look at it and go, well, I'm nowhere near as good as Witsit, and I know only what Witsit or I know only what Kent Hovind repeats. So how am I going to be able to argue with these people that have sort of knocked down Kent Hovind and knocked down Witsit? And I think that's the value that you get out of these debates.
Oh, they'll just challenge your claim. Oh, how did you knock them down?
Yeah, of course. Anyway, thanks, Mark.
Yeah, good to have you,
guys.
Bert. Thanks so much.
And nice meeting you, Bert.
Yeah, fun talking to you.
Nice to meet you.
Well, for my money, the reason why I debate primarily, I mean, it's good if you can do a good showing and you can change people's minds, and yeah, that's one of the reasons why I debate. But the primary reason is I just enjoy the debate. Like I don't make any kind of grandiose I'm out to change the world. I mean, don't get me wrong. If people are convinced, that's great, and that's a good side effect. But I actually enjoy putting my ideas against others' ideas.
Yeah, and
so I think if nobody was watching, I would still do.
Yeah, and having the opposing and having the conflicting opinions, having the opposing sides on a given proposition is a good thing, because some people are going to be like, oh wait, I hadn't heard this side of the argument before. I think maybe, let's say it's you, Mark, or someone else. They go, oh wait, yeah, I was originally on the side of this person, but I think what Mark here or someone else here is bringing up who's in opposition of this, I think they're bringing up some more valid points there, and that can help. It's not always the goal, but like you said, if you enjoy, I don't think anybody here, well, I mean, there might be some people who get into it without the enjoyment of doing it. Maybe they hope to make a paycheck by doing it over YouTube, but you know, if you can, I mean, I used to have these conversations quite often, but over the years, people just never wanted to come into my channel and have these conversations anymore. Anyway,
maybe you should have thrown a few. Maybe you should have just absolutely thrown a few. You know, like just do really bad.
Well, they would say most of the people I talk to would say I already threw them, but I don't. Okay. But I don't do. But again, like Mark, one of the things I don't do is I've only done one pseudo formal debate. Most of the time, I just like to have a conversation, and you know, kind of like you do, like when you go into praise and talk about it. But being set up for like any formal debate, I've been challenged multiple times. I did one with Iger TV. It wasn't really formal because I told him I didn't really want to do a formal debate on flat Earth because I really didn't give a shit. But if he wanted to have a conversation and have the conversation, I was like, okay, we'll go ahead and give it a shot. And then when he told me that the layers of the atmosphere were impenetrable, and I said, well, how did they determine all these layers of the dome or whatever impenetrable? Yeah, but I mean, how did they get past the first layer if all of them are impenetrable?
Well, the thing is that impenetrable thing, there's an interesting story behind that, because basically they'll say, oh, look at this news article, it says the upper atmosphere layers are impenetrable, kind of thing. But when you actually go into that news story and go to the actual paper written on it, what the paper says is the layers are impenetrable to certain forms of radiation. Right?
Exactly.
So
exactly.
When you actually look into it, what they take from the news thing is, oh, it's impenetrable to everything. But
yeah,
news
it's not.
Isn't a scientific paper. Yeah, and that they made it sensationalist because that's what the news does. That's how they get the clicks. Because if they wrote, oh, it impenetrable to some forms of radiation, nobody would click on it.
Well, when I asked Iger that, he goes, oh, that's a good point. And then he changed his terminology to impermeable. But even if you're going to say impermeable, I mean, that would still go to the atmosphere where UV is 99% blocked by our atmosphere, and what we're protecting our skin and stuff from is 1% of that radiation from the sun that's being, you know, that the atmosphere is luckily blocking out 99% of. Because if we didn't have that atmosphere, there's no SPF on Earth that's going to really help you in any way, shape, or form, other than possibly being underground, and even then, probably to a limited degree, depending on how many feet you're under. So. Of dirt.
Well, and that was the problem with the hole in the ozone layer, that it was destroyed by chlorofluorocarbons, and sort of it stopped blocking it, and you saw a major incident rate in skin cancers and things like that, especially towards the southern hemisphere, and especially in Australia where I am, because that's where the hole was developing. So But that's a problem we sort of solved. I mean, not 100%, but we're well on our way to correcting the problem, which is really enheartening. I'll debate climate change. There's a few people out there who can debate. I mean, Jason Torn is amazing. He's a climatologist. Like, he's actually, fully, yeah. And Jason Torn, I haven't seen him around for a while, actually. I hope he's well.
I think he's been hanging out more on Clubhouse with conversations on Clubhouse than he has.
Right. Yeah. But I just haven't seen him post anything on
I have
or anything like that.
Yeah, I haven't either.
Yeah.
If I may, Mark, that's actually part of what I wanted to make a point about. My college advisor actually did a ton, or is doing a ton of research into climate change of the past and present. So if you ever want to do a debate on, human generated climate change, I would love to introduce you to him if you want a firsthand source.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd love to get a debate on it. To sort of just address what Bert said before he left, he'd love these other topics. I did write James and sort of say I'd love to do gun control, and I would love to do the death penalty. They're two things that I
Mark, you and I should do the gun control. I got some whacked out fucking debates for gun control. I got some.
Well, I mean, I'm for gun control. I hope you realize.
I am too, but mine was almost like dystopian future, kind of like government controlled. Like, people were required to have guns, but to a limited extent, and that you got an allowance for bullets and for training. And if you couldn't keep up with that training, you got fined per year unless you have a doctor's note or some kind of medical recommendation for why you can't.
What are you proposing here, Jay? Is this your opinion? Do you want some dystopian?
It was a thought.
Mad Max.
No. It was
the bullet farms and stuff. What are you proposing to me right now?
It was a thought. Well, it did come from some of your. I'm a big fan of George Miller's Mad Max movies, but it was kind of like a thought exercise, which was basically there was a conversation that I got in with my nephew years ago, and I wrote it in your live chat, where my nephew kind of holds to this idea that everybody should be able to buy whatever they want. So tanks, bazookas, Apache helicopters, fully armed, Stinger missiles, and all this kind of stuff.
Kevin's biblical studies? Was that Kevin?
No. He's not on here as far as I know.
Okay.
This is my older sister's kid. And we were having this conversation a few years ago, and I said, you don't see a problem with that, given the wealthiness, the wealth disparity here in the United States. And he's like, I don't understand. I'm like, well, you have like a top 1%, and then you have like that top 1% of that 1%, and they have like a shitload of money. So like these kind of people could buy like fully armed Reapers and Apaches and stuff like, whereas your middle class people like him, who does just like a, contractor job, makes $24-25 an hour. I'm like, sure, you might think it's all fine and dandy to be able to go to any store and buy an AR-15 and buy whatever magazines that you want and drums and stuff for that rifle. In the meantime, you got someone like Jeff Bezos, who's got 5 Apache helicopters, 4 Abrams tanks, shit like that. It's like
an ICBM.
You have a huge disparity now, not because of regulation of guns, but because literally of wealth and the ability of the wealthy to purchase not only that, but also control the demand of the ammunition, where they can restrict the amount of ammunition, restrict it, therefore raising the price of ammunition so that the middle class can't buy their ammunition, but they can afford that ammunition. So we got into that whole kind of thing. And it was really interesting. He did not find that realistic in any way, shape, or form. And I'm like, dude, when you see rich people, when you work in a gun store and you see somebody who has purchased 50, who's a collector of Colt 45s and has like 50 of them, because they have the money to buy those. Instead of collecting 1911 style pistols, this person could have used that kind of money to buy. I mean, this guy drove a custom Z06 Corvette, had a Bentley, had all sorts of money. So if you gave this guy all the leg room in the world to just basically money talks kind of thing, he could have had M60s, he could have had M249 machine guns, 240 Bravo, anything he wanted.
Rocket propelled grenades,
Exactly. And now all of a sudden, now you're going to sit here
The
and say,
question
well, it's not
is-
fair.
Well, the question is, do you want Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk to be the most heavily armed people in
No.
your country?
No.
You know, that's horrifying. You know, I wouldn't trust Elon Musk with Twitter, much less a bazooka. You
Musk
know, like,
already
come on
sold
now.
flamethrowers.
Well, that's true.
But-
that is true.
But I mean, Mark, but think of it this way: if they're doing this based under if they have a large corporation, let's say like Jeff Bezos, and they have Amazon, they can buy all these kind of weapons. And if the government were to basically leave these kind of firearms and munitions kind of open to the general public, right? They could buy all that stuff. They could possibly buy it and write it off on their taxes for security purposes for their company. So they
Why
don't.
not?
They get a tax write-off for purchasing things for their business, whereas the private citizen, what do they get? Well, it's just another expenditure. They don't get any kickbacks for that. My position was to restrict. My position was to restrict guns to allow to basically everybody had to have a particular type of firearm, and everybody had to be qualified. So it was like driving a car. If you wanted a gun,
Right.
you had to, and if you wanted like the top end weapons, if you wanted to go full auto, that kind of stuff, you had to qualify every 6 months.
Well, I don't think there should be a reason why a citizen should want to own a full auto weapon. There's no real reason to have that.
That was exactly why I brought up the what did they call it? The volunteer militia member kind of mentality, which is basically if you think that you can basically help to defend the sovereign state that you live in, well, then you're going to have to basically show that you can actually do that. So you're going to actually have to train and qualify every 6 months to a year, whatever, to make sure that you're proficient in your skills and safety and all that with those particular weapons and munitions in order to actually keep them. If you can't, then you have to relinquish those, and then you go back to like having to be able to own like a revolver and a shotgun, and then that's it.
Right.
That's all you get. Sorry, you couldn't cut the grade. That's all you get. You can have
Well,
guns, you just can't have those guns.
Well, I think there should be a lot of severe restrictions on who should own guns, like people with, you know, issues of mental health in their past.
That was the other thing that I had in there.
Guns.
Yep.
People that have a, you know, sort of a criminal record, like felonies, probably shouldn't be able to allow own guns.
No, I'm of a different position. I think if you have a felony, if you served your time and you're not on probation, you've served that. It's like voting. If you've served your time and you're done serving your time, you're no longer on probation, then just like with certain states that have passed the ability for people who were in prison to now vote again, same thing with firearms. As long as they can show proficiency,
I provisionally agree. But if you've got a history of violence with guns, then I think perhaps you should restrict ownership of them.
I think that goes beyond. I think that goes beyond the punishment that you already served the time for. I think that the probation would cover that. Whereas if the probation doesn't, whereas the person's no longer on probation, then yeah, they should be able to as long as they can afford them, as long as it's legal, long as they get the psych eval, stuff like that. I have no problem with that either. Then yeah, they can have as long as they meet the regulatory aspects. I thought that would be
then
fine.
Again, I would agree that if somebody has, you know, a history of traffic infringement to the point of hurting people, like vehicular manslaughter.
Basically restrict. That's a good license. That's a good point. So basically restricting their that's a good point. I don't necessarily disagree with that. That's a good point.
Jay,
sorry, Terrace, go ahead.
I sort of agree with you, but I do think it is very much dependent on the individual, what their crime was, etc.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Like I don't think a blanket statement should be made.
And my thought exercise was one that, like I said, this wasn't something that I held to like adamantly or as a political stance or anything. This was something because my brother is he's very much probably like if you got Mark Reed and my brother got talking about gun control, they'd probably be almost like probably 100% copacetic with it. My position with my brother was, and I don't have a problem with even my own brother's position or even Mark's position on gun control. I can do just as much damage with a shotgun as I can with a fucking AR-15. I can do more damage with a shotgun, a hunting shotgun, than I can with an AR-15. But that's just me. Either way, My position was kind of a social, like a social exercise, like a social thought experiment, more or less.
That's fair, and those are fun.
Yep.
May I respond to a couple things in the chat really quick?
Of course, yeah, go for it, Theros. What do you got?
Okay. Just to respond to Daryl really quick. My advisor did not study Milankovitch cycles. Those are more often related to glaciation, I believe, at least over the last couple million years. His main focus of study was the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, which was a sudden, massive global warming event during the beginning of the Cenozoic. He, as far as I know, is trying to figure out the possible causes of that and how that might relate to our current climatic situation and what changes we can expect from that.
Just quickly, Theros, Milankovitch cycles are the changes in temperature that the Earth experiences from variations in the orbit around the Sun. So we can tell from, say, ice core samples what years have passed from the Milankovitch cycles that show sort of the changes in temperature due to, God, I've forgotten now. There's a certain eccentricities in the Earth's orbit around the Sun,
like when it's closer. Like when the pole is closer to the Sun versus when the northern pole is away.
There's about 3 different ones, and I can't recall their names at the moment.
Sorry.
I might have to look them up.
Okay.
Yes,
but
you
that's
are
what they're
correct.
about.
You are correct. I was meaning more so it's very relevant to studies in glaciation. Because
yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Going back to the course I had on it, just depending on how close we are to the Sun can significantly affect how much ice we're going to have at the poles, and it's a bunch of things interacting with each other. It's very complicated.
Mm-hmm.
And also, just a quick little.
It's not that complicated. NASA's doing all of it, dude. It's just to get us away from God, man. It's not that complicated at all. It's just NASA.
Oh yeah, it's a NASA lie in order to convince us that God isn't real. Yeah.
Sorry, I just had to call that back. I know it's lame. I called it back. I apologize.
Fair, and to be an equally lame callback, I will debate God when he shows up in the chat.
Oh, there you go. Have fun with that.
Just John, really quick. Homo sapiens sapiens is our specific subspecies, not our species.
Correct.
It is just tiny, more joke kind of thing.
Yeah. God, your design here is really funny. What's that? Well, it's kind of like the concept of like a person heating themselves next to a kerosene heater. Well, in this case, you're walking around the kerosene heater at different like intervals, right? But they seem to be consistent. And sometimes you get a little bit closer to the kerosene heater, so you're hotter sometimes during that particular point as compared to when you're further away from it. And that seems to be the way God's infinite design, intelligent design seem to work with the Earth. Yeah, it gets far away here, and then shit gets cold, and then it gets closer here, and things get a little bit warmer. And you're like, why couldn't you make that a little bit more? Why couldn't you just make it an even circle? Just an even circle all the way around.
Sorry, just
Jay, haven't you
being a little
seen
bit
that?
Closer means that you get more heat, but it also means more melting, which means ice flows faster from the poles, which means it goes down farther south, which means you get more reflection of light back to the sun, and you get less heat to the Earth. And
bear in mind my snark is meant to be is sarcastic towards those.
I get it. You're fine, dude.
Yeah.
So something that I've asked
Jay, haven't you seen a solar eclipse? The moon's the same size as the sun.
Oh yeah, plenty of times.
Checkmate, atheists.
Yep.
So something I've tried to comment to Witsit in some of the other things. Something that's, and I think I might have mentioned this to Iron Horse in one of those after shows too.
Don't bring him up. Oh, he was talking about joining the after show. I'm like,
he's a train wreck too. But so you're gonna think this is very funny. So these guys will constantly harp about how they claim that it's impossible and nobody can go to Antarctica. But thousands of people go every year.
They have shipwrecks. There's shipwrecks and ice in Antarctica.
It's extra funny because where I went to college, they had like how you could do like semester abroad and like co-op programs. My school had a co-op program at McMurdo Station.
Wait a minute. Is he saying? Wait a minute. Is he saying The Thing is fake? Is he saying the movie Thing is based on a fake situation that no human beings would ever be in those particular areas of the world?
No, he thinks that like
Kurt Russell is real.
He thinks that like the New World Order government doesn't allow you to go on the other side of the ice wall or some crap like that.
I've heard that a lot.
That's the conspiracy.
They quote the Antarctic Treaty, which the Antarctic Treaty is just saying that nobody will like do mining or house armies on Antarctic.
Yeah, basically leaves it open. Yeah, it leaves it neutral. Purely neutral.
But like not only that, so like you could literally there's like a handful of schools that will like literally like pay to send you to go spend a semester there. And
but what's fucked up?
It doesn't cost all that much money. Like it costs like I don't know 10, 15 grand to put a trip together. I think Mr. Beast was gonna do a video down there or something. Like there was like so like what I've asked them questions was like if I put $20,000 up to send you and a bunch of flirters to Antarctica, would you go? And they'll just like poo me and be like nobody can go to Antarctica.
But what's funny about that treaty is I'm wondering, does the treaty say anything about the ICBM stored on a nuclear submarine by the U.S. that can plop itself up there for a little bit, launch a bunch of ICBMs, and then fucking scoot and move?
No,
like literally,
it's just on the Antarctic itself.
On the art, yeah. So it's perfectly fine for them to situate themselves there in order to do any kind of tactical maneuvering.
Not the Antarctica, that's the ocean. That's under maritime law, so it doesn't mean shit.
Oh, I gotcha. Okay, that makes sense.
Professors from going there and drilling ice cores.
Yeah, basically, yeah, and from destroying. It's a very delicate ecosystem. That's the thing. Like they're sort of like, oh, they won't just let people wander around. Of course they won't. It's a delicate ecosystem. You could absolutely could you imagine like flat earthers digging out, the sort of, taking chisels to the ice caps to try and find the UFOs? Like that would be a disaster.
I do agree with you to some extent, Mark. But on the other hand, quite a bit of at least the South Pole is just ice desert with nothing living for hundreds of miles.
Sure.
Depends on where you go, though.
Yeah, that's true. No, I get what you're saying. It's just, but to survive there, you really have to be. I think that if you did take the flat earthers there, they would just say, hey, there's a mountain over there. That's the ice wall. Yeah. We're not allowed to go behind it while someone desperately tries to stop them from killing themselves of cold and exposure from
winter is
give them a drone.
Yeah, the White Walkers are past there. We're not letting you go past the ice wall because the White Walkers are there and winter's not coming yet.
Now, see, what I think might happen is that they would all die of paradoxical undressing.
Ouch.
Wow. That's a hot take.
Well, just to be contrarian to everyone.
I don't know. I don't know what that means, so I'm just sitting here staying quiet.
Basically, once you start getting hypothermia, a certain subset of people will feel like they're really, really hot, so they'll strip down to try and cool off, which of course just makes them freeze faster. I feel like they would all do it intentionally just to go against what everyone else is saying about the science.
Oh, I get what you're saying. Yeah, I remember seeing guys. I remember when I was in the Army, speaking of undressing in the cold, like, because I was stationed in Fort Drum, New York for 3.5 years. So I took cold weather training like a lot of us up there. But when I joined my National Guard unit and we were doing training in Camp Atterbury, Indiana, to get ready to go to Egypt, and it was cold as shit. And like a lot of the guys that I was with, we're like training in January. We're like training this was like middle of December in Indiana, and it got cold as shit. And like I would say more than half these guys did not know how to dress for the cold. Like I caught one guy he had polypro on, his BDUs on, then he had his rain gear on, and then he had his Gore-Tex over that. And I was like, you need to take that shit off. He's like, why? And I'm like, you are going to die in some way, shape, or form, and it's not going to be fun. So so one of the sergeants was like, show him how to dress, man. You were in 10th Mountain, show him how to dress. So I actually had to show him. I gave him like a 20-minute block of instruction on how to properly wear polypro with their Gore-Tex, and all that kind of stuff. And that was pretty interesting.
It's kind of funny. Sort of the opposite thing happened to me when I was at a field camp for geology. We went out to the middle of nowhere, Wyoming. It was like 90 to 100 degrees every day. It was 2% humidity at most. I lost 50 pounds.
Yep. I did that in Sinai.
But some of the girls out there, like, it would get really hot and they would start sweating, and a breeze would come by and they would be convinced they were freezing. So they'd try to start putting more clothes on, which would only make them sweat more and then feel colder.
Yeah, actually, the only thing they have to do if it's still daylight out is to put on a long sleeve black shirt.
You can also lay down on the ground because it's all exposed rock and the rock is warm.
Just to give you a heads up quickly, I'm going to give a 5-minute warning. I've got to go in a little bit, so I do apologize, but wrap up in about 5 minutes. Carry on, and I'll wrap it up pretty soon. I'll see if there's anybody else going that we can move to. But
William Freeman is still going, but he's still talking about his icon.
Look, I know that had a lot of oxygen over the past week and stuff, and quite frankly, I've completely ignored it because I think that some people are just looking for attention, and I could not be bothered.
I do not disagree with you. I agree with you, Mark. I did not even get involved. I was like, wait, they were still doing a stream today. I was like, wait, is this still the conversation about William's fucking raccoon icon? And they're like, yeah. I was like, for fuck's sake. Okay.
I don't even care at this, but it's just I don't know. I came to the conclusion early on, and nothing has disabused me of this conclusion, is that the entire icon and the furor and the whole drama, it's exactly what he wants, which is just attention. So why are
it's an icon, but it's an icon he's had for a while. It just happened to, and maybe this isn't the first time it's drawn this kind of attention, but from what I heard, it's an icon that he's used for a long time. So I didn't really see the hoopla about it. I mean, I got the points, that especially the ones that Jay Bundy was making. But does William have a tendency to, in my opinion, sometimes think that he's kind of like a low-key attention whore when it comes to like kind of doing like wink at like kind of certain social things that he doesn't really care for? Yeah, it could be the case, but either way, I was just like, I can see having the conversation, but it's been going on for a while now, and it's like, this is getting a little old, guys.
I'm bowing out. I just think that, look, Jay, I hate myself for talking about it on this stream. Like, quite frankly,
I never even bowed in. I don't blame you. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I even brought it up. Apologies.
No, that's okay. That's all right. I totally get it. Okay. I'll wrap up here because that seems like a natural end. But thank you so much for joining me. I know. Does anyone have anything to bring up in the last few minutes while we're sitting here talking?
Nope, not me.
Thanks for letting me hop in. This is my first time sitting in one of these.
Oh, well, very welcome, Justin. A pleasure to have you, mate. Like, really, it was really good. So I absolutely enjoyed your company, and I enjoyed everybody joining me. Jay, you're always wonderful. Gek, it's good to meet you.
No,
not always. Doing debates. Not always. I will be the judge of that, sir. If you're still debating, man, I like to keep in touch with the sort of debate community. So, definitely hit me up on my email.
Yeah, I came in here only knowing Mark Reed. Every as far as I know, every other person that was in here when I joined.
Well,
I came
in here only knowing Mark Reed. That's the thing. But I was first in. It was only me. So there's that.
Y'all seem fun.
Thanks so much for
trying to get a Dino channel up and running, but it's slow.
That's okay. Well, hit me up with a link or something in the private chat, and I'll post it.
I don't even have any videos published yet, but thanks for that.
Okay. Well, come back when you do get started. I love to support new channels and new content.
Mark, you got to introduce him. You got to introduce him to Jill if he wants a talking buddy.
I would never force that on somebody. So if you do want more discussion, there's a Resurrection of Jesus on Skeptic and Ranting, Amy Newman's channel, which is where I first made my appearance. So I've got a big, soft, sticky spot in my middle for Amy Newman. Lovely person, does amazing discussions. If you do want to... like a jelly donut. Yeah, exactly, Jay.
Okay.
If you do want to go over there, please feel free. She's very, very welcoming, very, very nice. Just put Mark Raid in the chat. That's all I ask, because I love it when people do that. And she will know exactly what you're talking about. So go and raise some more arguments. And I do apologize for having to go, but it's been wonderful having you all here. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed. Do give a like and a subscribe if you feel that we've had a good conversation, and more good conversations to come. I love every second. Don't pay attention to Jay. He's jaded, and
I'm already a subscriber. I'm not going to give him a like. Fuck that.
Jay, that's it. I rescind all my likes for your channel, sir.
Too late. They're already registered. Go back and unlike. You're going to have to go back and unlike. You're going to have to go back and unlike. I'll do it. Good luck. There's only like 3 available.
It's time for more crappy mac and cheese with ketchup.
And too much milk. All right, beautiful. Well, take care, everybody. As I always say, be kind to yourself and to each other. Do take care and have a great night, day, wherever you are. Thank you.